Hello everybody and welcome to my channel where yes, I am still playing Cities Skylines 2, at least for now. I've already shared my first impressions in a previous video, so I'll try not to retread too much ground here, but in summary, the game had a rocky launch marred by bugs and performance problems. I did point out that the developers have been very honest about the state of the game and were clearly working hard to fix things, but while I have tried to remain optimistic, I couldn't help but feel a little underwhelmed, and I was not the only one. But Colossal Order's latest city builder has been out for a few weeks now. We've all had some time to get used to the game, and the developers have released a few updates to try and fix some of those initial issues. So has it worked? What do I think about the game 1 month in, and would I recommend it? Let's dive in. So for context, I've played the game for nearly 40 hours. I've decided to focus on one of the two cities that I started, which has now reached the huge city milestone and has a population of around 45,000. I've unlocked around 120 tiles and had the chance to play with trains, trams, metros, ferries and a lot of the other features that were locked away further up the development tree. But has any of that changed my opinion of the game since that slightly mixed first impression? First, let's talk about the graphics. Now I'll admit it's not exactly the most beautiful game in the world, especially as I'm stuck playing it on medium settings. However, it still feels like a significant upgrade from its predecessor, at least in terms of realism, though that's not always a good thing, more on that in a minute. I've had the chance to experience all 4 seasons, and I love how the weather changes, the trees turn brown, the snow creeps down from the mountains to cover the map. It gives a much better sense of the passage of time, and makes your city feel more like a real place. I also still love the day-night cycle, the sunset, the aurora, the sunrise, beautiful. However, I have to admit that I mostly play with the day-night cycle turned off, just as I did in the first City Skylines. It's just hard to see what you're building in the dark, plus the nighttime only makes landscaping even more difficult than it already is. To be honest, I like how the game looks, and I've accepted the fact that I'm stuck on medium settings until I can afford to replace my PC, which, to be fair, is long overdue for an upgrade. On to performance, which I think has been the major issue for most people. I have spent some time trying to balance my graphic settings and have got the game running at a fairly reliable 25 to 30 frames per second at 1080p with most things on medium. The only features I've turned off to improve performance are fog and volumetrics after seeing recommendations from other users online. I'd also have motion blur and depth of field turned off because, well, I always turn them off immediately in every game. One concern that I did have was whether a larger city would reduce that performance even further, but it hasn't had a noticeable effect. Maybe the frame rate has dropped slightly, particularly when zooming in and out, but it still runs relatively smoothly even with all those extra tiles unlocked. I can actually turn the settings up even higher, and the game does run, but my fans scream in protest and my CPU temperature starts to creep up, so I've left the settings where they are to avoid burning a hole in my PC case. As for bugs, well, there are definitely still bugs in the game, but I haven't really noticed anything game-breaking or anything that took me out of the game. Though to be honest, I spent more of my time focused on the big picture than looking at the small details. The game has mostly been fairly stable for me, though I can report I did have one crash to desktop after I'd been playing for a couple of hours. Fortunately, I had remembered to turn autosaves on. It's a bit odd that they're not enabled by default, to be honest, and I definitely recommend turning them on as I know other people haven't been as lucky as I have. Onto the gameplay, and, well, I'm still not sure exactly how I feel about it. The process of planning and laying out your city is still roughly the same as the first game, and I still enjoy it. Some of the annoyances have been taken away too. For example, you no longer need to spend time manually connecting power and water to your districts, except when you do, because some roads don't have pipes and cables underneath them, but never mind. I think a lot of the things I've struggled with in terms of the gameplay are just because it's different from Cities Skylines 1. And to be fair, the interface mostly does a good job of telling you why there is no demand for high density buildings or why a building has become abandoned. There are definite improvements to be made in terms of how the game communicates certain bits of information to the player, but I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of things. I've had the chance to try some tentative terraforming near water, which players of CS1 will know was always disastrous, and I'm delighted to report that the water physics is much less janky in CS2. You are much less likely to wipe out half your city just because you wanted the river to be a little bit shallower so you could put a metro tunnel underneath it, or because you decided you wanted to build an island off the coast. I've also had some trouble with traffic, something that people were concerned was missing as it didn't feature in any of the trailers and pre-release content. I can promise that there definitely is traffic in the game, though it still feels like there isn't as much as you would expect, particularly in the industrial areas, as one commenter pointed out. It does start to build up a bit later in the game, but I found that most of the classic tips and tricks like lane mathematics and asymmetric roads still help you to manage it. It is a little odd that some of the tools that were available in the first game to help you debug issues with the traffic are missing, but hopefully they'll get added in time. Meanwhile, there are some frustrations that have carried over from the first game. I find myself sorely missing certain mods that became essential for me. I would say that the developer has made some questionable decisions, particularly in light of how popular certain mods were. Why can't I have dedicated lanes at junctions? Why don't traffic lights work sensibly? Why can't I adjust the zoning on the roads? Why is there not some sort of snapping to get a bridge to be level on both ends? I've also had some time to think further about something that I said in my previous video. The new buildings do look more realistic, and I like that. But they're also so bloody enormous that it makes placing them really tricky. Still finding terraforming and road placement to be a bit frustrating, but again, they were in CS1 without mods. I suspect the problem here is partly due to the scale and art style being more realistic, and I think that makes it harder to get everything to look and feel right. This was much less of a problem with the smaller, more cartoony assets in the previous game. This is possibly one explanation as to why the game just isn't gelling for me. I firmly believe that realism is the enemy of fun. Inject too much realism into your game and you just risk it becoming boring and frustrating. I play City Skylines 1 partly for the cathartic pleasure of building a city, laying out paths and trees to make it look pretty. I found it almost therapeutic. I think they got the fun to realism balance right in CS1, and maybe it's a little bit off in CS2. It is disappointing and it is frustrating, but it's also not the end of the world. I don't think there's anything fundamentally wrong with the game that can't be fixed, whether that be through patches, DLC, or mods. Future Mike here. On that note, and before I wrap up, I just wanted to add something that I saw after I started recording the rest of this video. I'm excited to see that some modders are already cracking on with improving the game. Check out some of Biffa's latest videos to learn more about Thunderstore and the mods that are already available there. Personally, I'm not prepared to faff around manually installing things from GitHub, especially untested code that could break at any moment, but it's good to see some of the concerns are already being addressed. I think I'll just wait until the official Paradox mods arrive and just hope that they're everything they've promised they will be. So, would I recommend City Skylines 2? That's a bit of a tough question, which I guess in a way is kind of an answer. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it is hard to recommend the game right now, particularly given the news that the editor and mods have been delayed and may now be months away. I will be keeping an eye on the patches as they come out and might revisit the game from time to time, but I'm probably going to take a step back for a bit. I can't put my finger on it. To be honest, it's probably a combination of several different factors, but the game just isn't gripping me like the first game did. And there are so many games waiting in my Steam library that I'm struggling to justify continuing with the game. If anything, this has made me more appreciative of just how good CS1 was, and I'm tempted to go back to it and start a new city there rather than continuing with City Skylines 2. One thing I would recommend if you are thinking of buying it is to do some research first. Look at some of the videos from the other community members who've had access to the game since before launch. Hell, look at Colossal Order's own live streams. I did, and I'm glad I did. It gave me a much more realistic idea of what to expect. And, as with most things, managing expectations is the best way to avoid disappointment. On that note, I am planning a longer and less formal video where I take you on a tour of my city and discuss in more detail some of the things that I like and loathe about the game, so please subscribe if you want to see that and I'll try to get it out as soon as possible. For now, I think I would recommend holding off until the game has had a chance to improve, or at least waiting until it comes up in a future Steam sale. Final thoughts then? Well, it's sad to say it after being a fan of Colossal Order's work for so long, but I think City Skylines 2 needs a bit longer in the oven before it's ready to be enjoyed. I said in my previous video that I respected them for being honest about the performance issues and not delaying the game, but in hindsight I think a delay might have made people less angry than giving us the game in the state that it was in. For whatever reason, the game just isn't absorbing me in its current state, and I'm probably going to take a break from it. However, I also stand by the other thing that I said in my previous video. It's a shaky start, but I can see the potential. Most of the things that bother me, most of the things that I've seen other people complain about, they can be fixed, either by developer updates or through mods, and I'm confident that with time the developers and the modding community will turn this into a great game, even if I'm less and less certain it will ever reach the dizzying heights of the original Cities Skylines. For more City Skylines and other nerdy content, oh, you know what to do. Thank you very much for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.